Well, to honor everyone's time, we can go ahead and get started. And as others join us, just so that you know, Zach, Phoebe, and I are in Colorado, and Zach and Phoebe are down in the Denver metro area, and I'm up in the mountains. So that's where we're from today. We kind of, you never know where we're going to be at any given moment. But since we're Zoom, we would love it if possible. We understand if you can't, to have your videos on because it helps us connect with you. It helps you connect with others. If you like having a few pieces of blank paper is always helpful, or a way to take notes. In the breakout rooms, especially, please try to have your videos on. If not, no big deal, but work together. Do your best to stay engaged and present. If you feel yourself tuning out, you can always let us know. We can shift things. When you're not talking, keep your microphone muted, but you are welcome to unmute. This is a conversation. This isn't like us throwing stuff at you. If you have questions, you can type them in the chat box. Whatever mode of communication works best for you works for us. And then if you have questions, just let us know. I'm Donna Trujillo, Vice President of Tiered Services and Special Populations. I think this is my 26th year or 27th year in education, and I'm going into my 6th year with Generation Schools Network. I have been a Director of Special Education for the 3rd largest district in Colorado, as well as 10 of the mountain districts. Started as a middle school special education teacher, but I've taught pre-K through 12. And I also work as an advocate for students with special and gifted needs. Zach?
Hi, everybody. Zach Hess, Vice President of Prevention Services. Where my heart is in the prevention world. I started out my educational career in youth corrections. I was also a special education teacher, special education and science, and then moved into just general education. And I spent most of my time at a middle school. So I was a middle school science teacher and administrator, and then moved to the district, same district as Donna. And I was the director of health, wellness, and prevention. We were directors together, actually, on the same team. So a lot of the work my team did was around suicide prevention. So this is a topic near and dear to my heart. And I've been with Generation Schools Network now for about 3 years, I think, including contracting. So
yep.
Just
and
looking
then
forward to have this conversation with everybody.
And we also have our teammate Phoebe on today. Phoebe, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, hey everyone. I'm on the GSN user one. I realized I didn't sign into my personal one right before this. But my name's Phoebe. My pronouns are they, them. I'll just be doing any sort of support in the chat or tech support, sharing links, things like that today. So let me know if you need anything. I'll be checking the chat pretty regularly.
All right. I do want to start off our conversation just making some acknowledgements. In this work, I found this is obviously a very hard subject to talk about. Many probably in our group here may be survivors of suicide, meaning either themselves or close or family members that have attempted or completed suicide. And so just want to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves and recognizing that with some of the things we're going to talk about. We're digging into this subject. We want it to be helpful, not hurtful. So if you need to log out or one of those things and take a break, please do that. There's a lot of different, I've been a trainer for suicide prevention for a long time. There's a lot of different perspectives and opinions out there, informed by religion, culture, and life experience. So just be aware of that. Some of people sharing in your group, that not everybody has the same perspective often that I found around suicide. I think grace is really important. Seeking to understand and empathy is a huge deal when we're talking about that. And hopefully we're communicating that as we go through this. This is our agenda. I highlighted the top 4 because we're going to spend a little bit more time in the prevention type of conversation, but plenty of work in the intervention and post-vention work also. But that's where we're going to start. So you're going to see this. This is coming from the Suicide Prevention Resource Center. So not making any of this up. This is all very research-based approaches to suicide prevention. We're going to share a lot of resources with you also. The first this right off the bat, these are where Donna and I got a lot of our resources and a lot of our material from. So they're linked here when you get this presentation. You can really dig in. These are some wonderful resources. Donna and I personally have experiences using these and implementing them in districts. So please take a look at these. All right. First off, one of the pinnacle, I guess, or really informative conferences I ever went to, or talkers or speakers I ever heard, was Dr. Thomas Joyner. And he was, at the time, when I heard him, was with Florida State University. And he came up with this theory of interpersonal theory of suicide. So this theory, when I heard this, it really helped me design and work with our mental health director and really design programming and systems for suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention. In his work, what his research revealed was there was kind of three main points or main things to look at when you're thinking about suicide. One of them is if a person is considering suicide or completed suicide, there's these common elements. So thwarted belongingness is one of them. This feeling that you just don't belong, right? That you see it there, I'm alone, and not feeling connected. That is why we start off with connection and belonging, right? The other one is a perceived burdensomeness, and we'll talk more about that, but feeling like this person has been a burden. And then there's this other part that this is where Dr. Thomas Joyner really came in to his research, is he in his research identified that there's a genetic component really around this desire or this being able to use lethal attempts. It was something that he's found in common in like first responders, a lot of people in the military. It was this not having this fear of death, right? Not being able to. So sometimes it's good, right? Like being able to run into the burning building to rescue people. That's a good thing. And so the connection he made was all three of those needed to be in place for these lethal attempts to suicide. How I looked at this, being a prevention guy, was if I could take one of these out of the equation, then I'm doing pretty good, right? I'm not going to take genetics out of I can't take that out, right? That's something you're born with. That's what you got. But if I can program and I can create systems of support that help people belong and don't feel like they're a burden, then I'm doing pretty good, right? And so you'll see this presentation and the resources we get really are going to play into this theory. And I think it's a pretty solid place to start in how you view this and how you begin in your systems, your schools, or your community organizations, or wherever you're working. Just keeping this in mind, I think, is very helpful. All right. So universal supports in the classroom. If we're going to continue with the idea of connection and belonging, thinking through it at a tiered level and those layered continuums of support, what are some things that are going on in the classroom that are expected of the teachers, that are just the universal things in your organization? What do all kids or all people going to receive? What are the supports that everybody gets? Things like social emotional learning, things like, just identifying emotions and those kind of things. So ensuring that there's universal supports. Building a community of care. So this is a big thing. We're trying to build community. We want people to feel like they're connected. Community is such a strong protective factor. So we want to make sure we're doing that. I think circles are a great way. So if we're doing this in a school environment and any other organization, using circles is an incredible strategy to really build community. They've been used by indigenous people for eons, right? And they really do promote community. Anybody that's familiar with restorative practices understands circles, but you can do circles and not do restorative practice. It's just a great way to create connection and belonging. We want to do everyday things with kids. This is some of that universal things. Check-ins with students, check-ins with the people we work with, right? Are we just saying hi? Are we seeing how everybody's doing? In a classroom, it's an easy fist of five, guys, how are we feeling today? I mean, these are simple little things that we don't have to go crazy with. We don't have to have a lot of time planning, but it's things that we can do. Express interest. That's a huge thing, right? It's part of developing relationships. But if I can express interest in somebody, I'm creating connection and belonging. If the adults in youth's lives know that the people care, and that means expressing interest in what they're into, that matters. That's a huge deal. And now they feel like they belong, right? They don't feel like they're a burden. And I think also providing space in a classroom, in a school, for understanding big emotions. They're hard. They're very difficult. Those of us that experience big emotions or have in your lifetime, it can be a very scary experience. And we need to provide space for our young people to learn how to do those. So that would mean non-punitive, right? I mean, we all have big emotions. And if every time we express a big emotion or we become dysregulated, that's associated with a punishment, we're not going to grow. And I don't think adults do. I don't think we grow very well in those situations. So just thinking through having a space to understand those, what kind of learning, what kind of skill development are we doing? Are we saying it's okay to have big emotions and we're going to address those because they probably disrupt the class and disrupt the learning, but in a non-punitive way, in an understanding way that people can learn from that. And that goes right along with teaching those SEL skills. Social emotional learning skills is suicide prevention, right? Because they're going to learn a lot of those skills that is going to help them cope with those big emotions, feel safe, build relationships, make responsible decisions, all those good SEL components. Along with this connection and belonging, I said it before, I really believe in implementing restorative practices. First and foremost, creating community and relationships, but then when dysregulation, when harm and conflict happen, that we are using restorative practices to do that. The diagram to the visual to the right of there is called what I identified as the heart of restorative practices. I really believe it starts with dignity and treating people with dignity. Every person has self-worth and value. Again, belonging and burdensomeness, right? If I feel valued, then I feel like I belong and I don't feel like a burden, right? It's different than respect. A lot of times you'll see restorative practices talk about the 5 R's, one of those being respect. Respect is earned. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but respect is earned. And so that takes time. Dignity is a given. I don't care who you are, what's going on, you should be treated as if you have self-worth and value. When things go wrong, harm and conflict happen, we talk about accountability, not punitive discipline. We hold people accountable for their behaviors. That's key, right? We don't just let it go, but accountability looks a lot different. It's not always just adult driven. It is not tit for tat. It is not retaliatory, right? If you look at punitive discipline, it's usually like, well, you ruined my classroom, so therefore I'm going to impose this on you. It's adult driven. It really is usually retaliatory, and it's about shaming to change behavior, and that really doesn't work. When I handle it in this way, then I make a community whole, right? Even if I mess up and I'm held accountable, I still belong, right? I'm going to make things right. I messed up. I caused a disruption. I maybe punched a kid in class. If I'm part of the solution and make things right, then now I'm back in being part of that community. Everyone trusts me back in the community. Yes, this takes a lot of work. I know I'm just throwing out, do restorative practices. If it's something easy and magic pixie dust, it's not. But if you're looking at suicide prevention work, I would highly consider the restorative practices. And once you do that, belonging is established. I feel like I can belong, right? Again, non-punitive, non-exclusionary discipline and policies. All of this, suicide prevention is trauma-informed. Restorative practices is trauma-informed. Social emotional learning is trauma-informed. Dig in to trauma-informed practices and trauma-responsive practices. That is going to create connection and belonging. So one of the other then things that we talk about are resilience skills. We know, right? Life is stressful. Being a student, being a youth nowadays is stressful. There's always stress in our lives. And you and I, we all know this. We're constantly trying to cope with more things on our plate, with more stress, right? And some of us are a lot better at it than others. This image right here is from Sources of Strength. There's a link for that resource. It's a very much evidence-based, research-based approach to really to be building those resilience skills. And all it's asking kids to do. So if you want to buy this or you want to engage in this work, you reach out to Sources of Strength. We used it in our district. It was very, very effective. We actually reduced our suicide rates by a lot. And we contributed it to really pushing hard on our youth engaging in Sources of Strength. This can be adults. This can be in your organization. It doesn't have to be a school-based program, and it's not. And they'll explain that. but it goes through different parts of that wheel. There's 8 things. So your mental health, right? Do you have access to mental health supports? That's what this means. So how are you taking care of your mental health? And is it a safe place to be able to say, my mental health is in the tank right now and I need some help? That is a strength if you're able to do that, right? If there's not stigma. We know a lot of communities out there culturally, rural versus urban. There's a lot of communities out there where talking about mental health is not a safe place. It is not a strength. So if you can create environments where we can openly talk about it, right, then that's a huge strength. Family supports. For a lot of people, the family can be very much a source of strength. For others, we have to recognize that the family situation is not a source of strength. But for a lot of us, if we can tap into that, that's a huge thing, to identify people in our family that can come alongside us, that are going to support us, that all these things, right? That could be a source of strength. Positive friends and mentors. So positive friends, trying to get our youth especially to understand, and that's part of social emotional learning, right? Relationship skills, right? If I can identify positive friends, friends that are going to keep me accountable, friends that aren't going to encourage me to drink and use substances at a party, right? Like ones that are going to hold me accountable, make sure I show up to practice. Like those are the positive friends. That is incredibly important work for our youth. A lot of our youth, you'll hear this, my chosen family in this work, right? A lot of our youth, because their families are not very supportive, they make up their own family and they surround themselves with positive peers and other positive people. Mentors can be one of those, right? People like a coach. If I'm an athlete, then those coaches can be mentors. If I'm in performance arts or the visual arts, like I find people that can be a mentor, my choir teacher or someone else in the industry and music that can provide mentorship for me. Though we want to connect our youth to those. We want to connect our adults and those all of us to our mentors. Those can be such powerful sources of strength. Healthy activities. Yeah, right. The research is very clear around mental health. Physical activity and mindfulness are the 2 most research-based interventions or activities that we can do. Now, not everyone wants to get physical. I get it. But what are some healthy activities, eating healthy, all these kind of things that we want to help people explore? We want our youth to explore different options. We want adults to explore different options to make sure that they're doing healthy activities, like not binging on a gallon of ice cream and binging Netflix, right? Like that's a good in a pinch, but that'll have some consequences later on. Generosity. Research is super clear. If you're struggling a little and you haven't done a gratitude journal, try it. Gratitude and is an amazing part. I think that really goes with generosity. The campaigns in Sources of Strength actually have youth do campaigns like doing a can drive, going to homeless camps and handing out sweatshirts or whatever it is. Like there's a lot, working for the Humane Society or any of those things, volunteering time. It feels good. It does the body good. It does the soul good. So generosity is a huge one. Spirituality, whatever that looks like. We explore all different kinds of spirituality. It doesn't have to be religion. It can be yoga. It can be mindfulness. It is something that connects people to a inner purpose that they can find. So there's a lot of room in spirituality, but we also know how that is a benefit for people's mental health and resilience skill. And then the last one, physical health. Talked about that with healthy activities, but physical health has more about access to doctors and healthcare, right? Making sure, one of the things they talk about a lot in this is being pain-free, right? Pain is unfortunately a very big contributor to suicide ideation. And so we want to be able to make sure that people have access to good healthcare and taking care of that physical health and any of those things that are getting in the way. So anyway, those are great. There's a lot that goes into that. Sources of Strength, another one that I linked, a great resource to explore. Okay, we talked about this, and so I want to make sure we're talking about it. Social emotional learning. This is the Castle 5 competencies. That's the image that you're seeing there. We want to create, like we said, communities of care, communities that encourage, right, mental health and encourage talking about it, getting rid of the stigma, all those kind of things. Regulation spaces in schools are a wonderful, wonderful way to encourage this. Calm down quarters, some people call them that, or regulation spaces in classrooms, in these organizations, in these other facilities where kids are being served. Just helping kids identify their emotions, identify what their body is telling them when they are starting to become overwhelmed with feelings and strong emotions and stress, right? That we let them advocate and then give them a resource, right? It's not about, every time, I'm just going to go in this because life is getting hard or school's getting hard, I'm just going to hide out in this corner. That's not what it's about, right? It's about recognizing that they have those emotions, but it's also about skill building, right? And there's a lot that goes into these. You can Google, there's all kinds of great resources around setting up calm down rooms and regulation rooms. But I really recommend doing that. And it's so, I don't know, it's so important for our youth to be able to have that agency and know that they can take care of it and that there's a place for them where they're not going to get in trouble. And that, again, just goes along with that social emotional learning and that skill building. That's what it's all about, is building those skills. So if you're not, the social emotional learning is a key component of a suicide prevention program.
It looks like we have a question in the chat.
Yes, let's go.
Yeah, how are calm down corners set up and used for secondary 7 to 12 grades? From Marianne, if I'm pronouncing
I
that.
love that. Yes. So yeah, I know a lot of people attribute or think about calm down rooms as only in elementary school. I've seen, oh my gosh, some of the best ones I've seen are in a high school. So I've seen both versions. So a room for high school students, right? Again, you have it's a target. It's a tier 2 usually intervention. You're working with those kids that we know or have strong emotions, that become dysregulated, that obviously have some lagging skills, right? I always say this, Donna and I talk about this all the time. We do such a good job. Well, we do a pretty good job on identifying kids with math and reading lagging skills. Like, we do all this work, but we got to put that same energy into our kiddos that have skills deficits in behavior and emotional regulation. So once you find that out and you have this targeted population of kiddos, then that becomes a resource room for them. There's usually an adult that mans that, but it is almost like they have a plan when they go there. They know what skills they're trying to build. They know what tools work for them, what strategies, coping strategies work for them. That it takes work, upfront work, right? And you're logging in, you're keeping time. The goal is 10 minutes, right? And then you're back in class. So it's all about, really, again, agency is huge here, right? These kids know they're making progress. They're building skills. And oh my gosh, look at me. I'm going back to class, right? And I identified that I was going to lose it, right? I started feeling tension in my body. I started noticing my respiration increasing. I started noticing these things, and I'm going to advocate, and I'm going to go to the room, right? There's a lot that goes into this. There's a lot that goes into this, but that's the premise. And then when they go there in a high school or a middle school or whatever grade, they use those skills. There's someone they're monitoring. They're like, hey man, 10 minutes. Let's see where you at. I think I'm good. All right, let's go back to class. Right. And it gets less and less. And pretty soon they're not using the room. How beautiful is that? In a room, in a classroom, right? I've seen these set up so they are very adultish, right? It's like not a beanbag and maybe a tent that you would see in the elementary, but maybe it's like a cool cushy chair, like a teen would like that my daughter has in her room, right? Like something that's fun. Maybe there's some weighted stuffed animals in there that the teens like. Here's what I would do. I would recommend is, if you're going to do that in your classroom, they work with the students in your classroom and you ask them, hey, what kind of a space would you like? What is going to be something comfortable for you? Do we need to put up a partition so you have some privacy, right? Very cool. What kind of things do you want to do in there, right? And that's also sharing power. One of the biggest, that's a huge mental health protective factor for our youth, is when we share power, when the adults aren't dictating everything and they are. So that's how I would do it. I mean, I guess that would probably be the first step, as I would incorporate the youth in that conversation and see what makes sense for them and what they would want that space to look like. And then set clear expectations. Guys, just because it's getting hard, we aren't hiding out and they're listening to our music all, for 30 minutes of the class. That's a 10-minute, right? You got to do that work. But hopefully,
and
also
as far as staffing the room, I've seen where the counselors, the mental health providers, speech providers, occupational therapists, paraprofessionals, they all take turns. So it's not like you need to hire someone to do this, but it can be a good model to follow. Also, with special education, a lot of our students do have scheduled breaks. And if you have center-based programming or paraprofessionals, they have to be with them anyway. So they can man that classroom and be able to be present with students too. I want to call out, you don't have to hire an additional person for this. Zach, when you were an administrator, I know you sat in your treehouse. That's what you called it at your school.
Yeah. So that I had a shift a couple days a week. I took a time, I answered emails or did whatever I did in there, and everybody had a shift. So if it becomes a priority, it becomes a priority, right? And you make it happen. That's what it ends up being. All right. So increasing help seeking, that's the next strategy for suicide prevention. It's really important that we allow this to happen, right? That we make things available. And that starts with making it okay to seek help. I know I sound like a broken record, but stigma is huge, y'all. Like, I want to keep emphasizing reducing a lot of our communities out there, and Donna and I work a lot in our rural communities, and it is a huge stigma to talk about it. And there's a lot of reasons why. I totally understand that, right? But it is very hard then to seek help if you know you're going to be judged, or if the whole community is going to know about it, or like all those kind of things. So reducing the stigma is huge. And there's a lot of strategies around that. But one of the easiest ones is that we're just talking about it, that we're setting expectations in our organization, in our school, that this is what we talk about, right? That it's okay for us to talk about mental health and getting help. So campaigns and communication are huge. Sources of Strength does some of these things with their campaigns, right? They run these campaigns. They really encourage that we are talking about it and opening up that conversation. So that is a huge thing. Modeling by adults, if we're talking about our youth, right? Modeling, our youth totally see it, right? And so if I'm communicating in a classroom and my kiddos in my class trust me, or if I'm an administrator, principal, or whatever, and I'm, and they look up to me or they see me, and I'm like, man, like I'm struggling with some things, right? I need to get some help. I need to really start looking at self-care. I need to start, they notice those things, right? If I start doing some mindful breath, or I pause the classroom and say, hey, y'all, I had a rough night last night. I'm still kind of just on edge. I think we need to take a moment. Right? Because I need to do some strategies for myself. That's huge. Making the resources available is a huge thing, right? If they want to seek help, and maybe they want to do it privately, right? They don't want to go to their counselor, they want to go to somebody, and then but they have nothing, they don't see anything, so posting the numbers, posting the resources, having posters on your bulletin board, sending this out to parents, sending it out to the youth, right? Put it in their planners. We did this at our school as part of our planners for our middle school. Again, I was a middle school guy. Part of our planners was a list of resources, especially for suicide prevention. So they had the hotline in there. They had the text they had text to tip. So it was readily available, and we communicated that it was good. Please use these, right? Use me. I can get you in contact, all those kind of things. All right, continuing on. With identify and assist, that's the next strategy for this work. And I think, Donna, you are up on, no, I'm still doing this. Sorry, I'm up until the break. So screening protocols, there's a lot out there. I think you could even identify your own. I think the biggest piece of identifying and assisting and using screening protocols is just making it part of what you do. And just making it known and communicating. We actually just had a meeting the other day, and we were talking about a hotline we're developing, right? And what does a screener really mean? A screener really means that you take every opportunity to ask questions and to see if people are identifying as they need some help or they're struggling with suicide. ASQ and the CSSRS, you can look those up. Those are quick and easy protocols that you can use. A lot of SEL, honestly, a lot of SEL companies and curriculum have an element to that of surveying kiddos and screening them, and then identifying some of those students that might be struggling with mental health. So that can also be used as a screening protocol. Another big thing to do is engage in some very researched and evidence-based suicide prevention trainings. QPR, question, persuade, refer, is one that is out there a lot. You might already have that. You've seen that. It's easier, a little simpler than assist. I was an assist trainer. I'm a little partial to assist, but it is heavy duty, right? There's a lot that goes into it. But it's very thorough. And so that's another one to look at, and they offer safe talk to community. So the assist is going to be like really intervening. There's a lot of strategies on there on what to do when someone identifies and how you approach that, and then how you follow up, those kind of things. And then a safe talk is a little less intense of a training, and usually great for school 15 and above. So it's great for youth 15 and older, and also just for community organizations or just opening up that for-year community. Signs of suicide, that's another great curriculum you can buy. I think we have that listed. So acknowledge, care, tell. Those are down below are some of the resources that you could look up and you can explore. All right, I'm hustling.
I think we just had one question in the chat about screening, Zach.
Yeah,
If screenings require training.
They don't, I don't know if they require training, they require communication. If you were in a school environment and all of a sudden you're going to start screen in our district, you did not screen youth for anything without parent permission, right? So just be cognizant of your community and where you're at. Some communities have a lot more trust and they're like, hey, we're doing this screener, opt out if you don't, like, let us know if you don't want them. We had to kind of do it differently. It's like, we're going to screen your kid. Is that okay? Right? And so some of these things, you just got to be aware. So the screenings are pretty easy. And so I don't think they need training. It's more around the communication and letting staff know, letting community know, and then being prepared for the results. So let's say on a Monday, I'm going to screen our kids. We're going to do in my district, what we did in my school, we did signs of suicide training, which talks about screening and identifying. But what we knew is that whole week, we were going to, our counselors cleared their calendars, our psych and social worker cleared their calendars, because we knew there was going to be a huge uptick in kiddos needing to be seen, self-identifying, or friends like, oh, Zach was saying this, you need to go check on him. Like we already knew that. So you have to plan if you're going to do these things. That's the big thing. All right. All right. Nope, sorry. I should go back. Sorry, guys. So just creating the opportunities for them to share is huge on identifying assist. It takes courage. It's hard to do. I think it's really important that you understand secondary traumatic stress syndrome. In this work, it's like swimming and thinking you're not going to get wet. When you engage in suicide prevention work, you're talking to kids, you're doing interventions, you're doing screeners. Just remember to take care of yourself, because you're going to hear some stuff and it's not going to be easy. Advertise and promote these resources. That's the suicide hotline. That's, kids can text it. Like these are great ways, and those can help really identify, and it really can help assist kids if they don't feel like they're going to let school adults know or anybody like that. So those are just sort of those anonymous approaches. All right, common warning signs. So you'll hear some things. So this is part of the identify, right? If we're hearing these kind of things, here are youth, here are our friends, here are family members, talk about these kind of things. These words that you'll hear or you get a sense of, it might be time to intervene. Behaviors, changes in what they do, any of these list of things. You may have heard these before, but maybe not. And I think it's important. Part of the trainings that you go through all of these and help people identify what the invitation is, meaning I'm inviting you to talk to me about suicide because I'm throwing these things out there, right? And I need to talk to somebody. So these things are good to just keep in mind. All right. So responding effectively is integrated with the identify and assist, right? So those programs that I talked about before, they're also part of the responding correctly and effectively, evidence-based strategies, QPR. So the question, persuade, refer, assist. These are ways that you can respond. And I would say really dig in and do your research. We don't have a long enough presentation to talk about all the exact right ways to respond, but we can provide you these resources. If you need a quick and easy, this diagram helps, because basically these are based off of this kind of same thing. You're asking about suicide. Do not be afraid. Don't mix your words. Are you thinking of hurting yourself? No, I'm thinking of killing myself. Right? Those are two different things. You cannot be afraid, if you're going to engage in this work, to have that conversation, be able to ask. Keep them safe. These other ones talk about this, but how do we keep that person safe? How do we get them connected to resources? Right? We're there. Somebody's there. We have someone there. We identify a family member, someone that can be there with them. Again, they need to feel like they belong, that they are not a burden. And help them connect to resources, get them to the hotline, get them to a doctor, get them to the ER, whatever those things are, and then figure out how you're going to stay connected with them. How are we following up, right? What does that look like? Super basic, those 5 things, but the other ones will go into those with greater detail. There is a range of services, so everybody's going to be different. So it really depends. There's not one size fits all. So just understand that. And it's really important, if you're a school or an organization, that you have these readily at hand. So whoever is handling this understands, they have the resources in hand, they know what to do. And they can get and respond effectively, and they can get people to help in crisis. Okay. All right. Fast and furious. We're going to do a time now where we can share out. We know that you got a lot of ideas in your head, and that you guys have been doing this work probably out, on your own. And hopefully here trying to get some more resources and ideas. We want you to get some ideas. So we're going to do a breakout with you, and Phoebe is going to get you in those breakout rooms. We will have to hustle through. So I'm thinking maybe 5 minutes. We have smaller groups, so maybe 5 minutes in a breakout, Phoebe.
Welcome back. Can we ask a few of you to share out? Was there anything shared that was new, or so that we can all learn from each other? Nothing new?
I can share a strategy that I learned from a youth pastor quite a few years ago. Very often, if students are going to tell you something serious, they'll start with "promise me you won't tell." And as a mandated reporter, I really can't make that promise, because I need to report if they're going to do harm to themselves, others, or property. And so what he said that he used, and I've used for, I don't know, 20 or 25 years, is "I promise I'll do what's best." And that seems to work with students. I haven't ever had a student say, "Never mind, I'm not going to tell you." I mean, that could happen, but we can't make a promise that we're not going to tell, because then we're breaking the relationship that they have with us that encouraged them to come talk to us in the first place.
I love that, Marianne. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I really like it.
That's helpful. Anybody else? Well, remember, you can add in the chat. We can keep moving along. Feel free to share out whenever. Okay, Zach. All right. So what do we do now? How do we reduce access to means of suicide? Well, like we've been sharing, is educating family, friends, and community members. We have to make sure that we're storing medications safely, firearms are in the right place, locked, gun safety. Also, if there's guns in the home, making sure that students have that safety training and understand why they're there and not to use them. Changing medication packaging. We want to make sure that students are safe. We also have to have it labeled, yet make sure that they know what's dangerous, and if there is something dangerous, keep it away. It's amazing how some will think that they'll just take anything, right? Like one of the students I worked with took her mom's thyroid medication, all of it. And luckily it wasn't harmful, but them finding that, they were able to then get help. And then the barriers on bridges, yeah, that's a thing. We have to make sure that those are in place. So if you need that in your community, reach out to your community, your town hall, your city council members, whatever it is, especially those places that are near your school. And then what are our top 3 means of suicide? So you can see it differs a little bit from genders, between the genders. Males, the firearms, suffocation, drug poisoning, these are the top 3 for both genders. Females are more likely to use drugs to commit suicide. And suffocation is something that a lot of people don't talk about as well. Oh, Zach, we have a question in the chat box. Would you mind answering that one? Are you saying to put an RX of over-the-counter medication in different types of packaging?
Yeah, that can be a strategy also. So if you know, like if you're trying to reduce the means and a student may have a plan, but you have to have medication and part of their plan was I'm going to take the oxy or something like that, you can change the labeling so that it's not. I mean, but again, you got to be really careful because that's another danger. Like, don't say it's Tylenol and right, like you know what I'm saying? Like that's going to be something that we'll go over in that stopping a plan. And when someone identifies that as a plan, then that can be a strategy.
Yeah, and the best way is to keep the medications locked up.
Yeah, and there's actually packaging now that has locks. So there's actually, you can Google this really easily, and it's cheap. You can get them on Amazon even. But they make prescription, or they make medication containers that actually have like a bike lock combo on them. And so you can't, I mean, you could cut it open or break it, but you're not going to just be able to turn the cap. You actually have to put a combination in to get it out. And that's a really effective way also to stop that. So.
Okay, next slide. So effective care and treatment. Support must be timely. It's not something to wait for or say, oh, I'll handle it later. It needs to happen immediately. And we need to learn to reduce the financial, cultural, and logistical barriers. So things like Zach said, having your resources easily accessible, readily available, thinking about that community, the cultural background, that's where that social emotional learning component comes in, because if you understand your students, you've developed relationships, you know how to talk to them based upon their cultural differences, their cultural background. And then that financial, really understanding that there are free resources out there, utilizing those resources, accessing those resources, going out into your community, finding those resources, developing memorandums of understanding with outside organizations can help. It takes the community. It doesn't just have to be you. And those local providers are important to just have right there, be able to hand them to them. But a lot of families, I will tell you this, the best developed resource guide is the one that has how to contact, who to contact, and what to expect from that contact, right? So many families, when they're in crisis, you give them a number, they may set it aside, but if you take the time to give them the who, what, why, when, and how of that organization, they're highly likely to contact it. Also, in our organization, we had a discussion about this the other day. You may need to be the support person sitting with that family, making that call or connecting them with that provider. Sometimes just giving a number or resource is not enough. And then the care and transition linkages. So uninterrupted care is critical. You have to keep track, you have to keep a log. And like Zach said earlier, there needs to be a support person. It's a continuum of care, not just, okay, here you go, good luck with this. But keep documentation, Have your processes in place so that you know who's responsible for what, who's doing the follow through. Meet together, connect together, collaborate. And then it's important to involve the person at risk and their support network in these transitions and linking them to resources. If they're transitioning back to school, determine what the school can do to support outside strategies. If that student is working on a goal with their mental health provider, it would behoove us to know what that goal is and to support them. A lot of times, even as a special educator, I'll have a student who's receiving services from an outside provider. I want to know, what terminology are you using with that child? Making it consistent so that they're not getting different things from all sides, but they can also get that transfer of learning as well. And then creating those formal referral protocols. This helps you with your documentation. If the youth need to get support, then we want to follow up and communicate, check in on them, know who their contacts are. Even the parents knowing who their contacts are at the school, knowing who you need to reach out to in each of those places and doing so. And like I said before, does everyone understand and agree to the criteria for supporting that child? And are they using the same language around that support? And then those care and transition linkages. I mentioned this a minute ago. Those memorandums of understanding. How does the process of releasing and communicating information happen? Do you need a form signed to release that confidential information to be able to talk to each other? Do you need parent permission? And then oftentimes this step gets missed, right? Or it's just something where we got too busy, the student needs to start back to school. What I always do is when that student's leaving, I try to schedule the reentry meeting, or at least put a hold on my calendar for that, for when I think they'll be back. And I always adjust it or put myself as a reminder on my calendar, a reminder to reach out so that I don't miss the opportunity for that reentry meeting with the family and the student. Those are critical. And like Zach said, with restorative practices, that's part of bringing that sense of belonging back and keeping the community whole and making that student feel welcome. It also gives you the opportunity to know, is there anything else we need to do to support that student from what they learned when they were accessing those outside resources? And then cross-training. Does everyone understand the process, right? The classroom teachers often get pulled out of this. A student will go to their counselor or mental health provider and never return back to the classroom. The classroom teacher has no idea what happened to the student. They should know that the student is out. You don't necessarily, depending on your district's processes and policies, have to say why, but they should know that the student is not coming back. And they should also know and understand the process for getting that student help should they need it. And then follow-up contacts, make sure you have someone who's tracking this, doing weekly check-ins. Oftentimes, so often with schools, we wait and don't check in until the parents contact us to come back. Parents and families need support too. By doing those weekly check-ins, it can help them feel part of the community. And then doing parent academies, parent outreach, communication and education. I know with the sources of strength, like Zach said, does help with that too. We're not saying you have to only use sources of strength. You can develop your own. It's just one tool that's already readily available for you. And then we know, as we all in our lives have likely experienced someone dying by suicide, we have to be prepared for what happens after. So we have to have a plan. I go to a lot of districts across Colorado and the nation, and they don't have a plan in place for when. So if you don't have a plan in place for when, please take the time to consider it and really think about what happens. And don't forget that if it's a student, the whole student body may be affected, the staff, the adults, the community members. We have to think about everyone. Most districts, or many, some of the rurals do not, but have a crisis team with trained people. So for some of the rural districts who don't have this, they partner with their sheriff's department, police department to develop that crisis response team, or the mental health provider community in their area. It not necessarily, if you don't have the resources, is it someone within the school? And then prepare is recommended training for school and district teams. And we mentioned it before. Make sure you look into that. That can help you with resources too. And critical, be prepared to support everyone. They need to be heard. People need to talk. They need access. And you know what? It may take time for them to access those services, but be available, have people available. And when Zach and I were talking yesterday, it's important to remember others who are affected. I talked to Zach about when I was a special education teacher, I had a middle school student who in high school died by suicide. I was impacted, but at that time, no one reached out to me. I didn't know, nobody said, here's your resources. They didn't think about the teachers who had that student or had interacted with them. So we were left to deal with that on our own. So if that student has been in other schools in your district or been K through 12, think about all the others who have been in contact, work with those schools to at least provide resources for anyone who interacted with the student. We're responsible for making sure the entire community of our school is safe and healthy and has the resources. So postvention, this is an incredible example. So we know that veterans have the highest death rate by suicide, and they took time to develop a really great program to support, which educators, we often think, oh, we have to reinvent the wheel and we have to take this. Sometimes it's better just to take what's already out there and use it because it's evidence-based, research-based, and it's been effective. So with this, you would notify. So after receiving the verification of suicide, you would want to send immediate notification to the employees and confirm compliance with confidentiality requirements. We want to ensure that communication is factual and includes accurate information. Then we educate, provide information on common reactions following a suicide loss. So give suggestions for self-care and resources for employees. In the district that Zach and I worked in, this was an immediate text, email out to people. The other thing they did was proactively before breaks, they would send out those mental health resources. So that's outside of this protocol, but something to consider too is when we're going into breaks, especially around the holidays, we see suicide rates increase during that time. You can educate and send out resources proactively, and then again, should something happen. Unite. Consider ways to mourn collectively to promote healing. Allow people time to process together. Create a place for emotional support. Offer that practical support, and sometimes even meal coordination to the family, or what I've learned, grief groceries are a great way to support families who have had a loss. And then reaching out to family members, workplace condolences, helping those who are impacted be able to move forward. And then sustain. We want to plan and execute strategies to offer long-term. When I was talking to Zach yesterday, with the loss that my family recently experienced, you get this flood of people those first couple weeks, that month, and it's almost overwhelming and you can't even process it. But as the time passes, fewer and fewer people reach out to check on you, and that's actually when you need the most support. So don't forget that long-term sustainability, and don't forget the people who matter, who are needing that support, and checking in on your staff. So what are some post-crisis strategies that you can implement for healing? We do this with schools who work with us. We may have a grant for something completely different. They call us and say, we just had a suicide in our community, in our school community. We've gone out and done training on coping, self-care, mindfulness, something uplifting, like Zach and I have been saying, that self-care strategies, bringing the community together, letting them reestablish their baseline, and being able to have the resource. It's usually best when you do these to have an outside resource present. Work with your family and community to create appropriate supports. We don't want to just think of what people want and do it. Sometimes that's not the right thing. It's good to talk to the family or those impacted about what they can do. And like we said, checking in, right? Having a designated point person to stay in touch with the family so they're not overwhelmed. And grief doesn't go away. We learn to cope with it. There are times when coping does become difficult. And so staying connected can also help that family or that person feel like they can reach out to you too when they need something. And then just remain aware and cognizant and ready to support. So communication is key. Don't over or undercommit. Collaborate. Avoid those memorials or anniversaries. So in this slide, if we can encourage you to look, if you get the presentation and you can click on one resource, we recommend clicking on this After a Suicide, a Toolkit for Schools. We could have done 3 days of presentation on the material that's within this little toolkit. It's about 50 pages long. If you have one resource to take away, this would be it. So all these are communications you should follow, the do's and don'ts. So do leverage your crisis plan. Do develop informative messages. Make sure you use everyday language and common business terms. Try to avoid those acronyms. Also try to think of reading levels. Anywhere between 3rd to 6th grade is typically your best reading level. And make it accessible to those with disabilities. And do assume that all communications made during the crisis will become public. So as you're writing that communication, news media, everyone, community members, they will grab a hold of that. So we're not saying fear communication, you need to communicate, but like previously, it said remain factual. And don't give opinions, remain factual in your communication. Do show humility, display empathy, and be conciliatory. We don't want to disregard. Practice that active listening. Zach and I do presentations where we have you work on listening. We'll have people pull up a picture on their phone. They are not allowed, the person listening is not allowed to ask questions, not allowed to interject as the other person is talking. And what we hear time and time again, that the person talking really felt heard. And they felt like the person understood them even without words. So things to not do. Do not downplay the event. If it's bad, say so, but you don't have to say more than necessary. Do not go off script, speculate or declare that problems are resolved if they aren't. Do not lie or exaggerate or make promises you can't keep. We don't want to, we oftentimes as humans, we have the empathy and we want to do something. We start talking too much and it creates problems. We want to be there. And just like we said, like you said, Marianne, promise to do your best. That's a great way, right? You're going to do your best. I love that strategy that you shared. And then do not share your anger or display arrogance or cast blame. And we have a question in the chat. Let me pull that up. So let's see. Phoebe so Marianne asked, how do we educate students to report about friends? I often hear they talked about suicide, but I didn't think they meant it.
Yeah, so that signs of suicide presentation starts about in middle school. I think there's an elementary school version too. That's a really good one, and it's just helping students have it. That's why they call that ACT, that they have that acronym. And so part of that is talk. So to tell an adult if they're hearing things, and so they go through a lot of that. It is hard. That's one of the hardest things I've come across in all my time in schools is even with my own kids, and oh, my friend said this, and I'm like, did you tell anybody? Like, oh my gosh, guys, come on. So it is hard, but that signs of suicide. And then the safe talk is also very helpful. That's for 15 and above is when Living Works will do that presentation. And so I guess those are to me really good resources that have that in the curriculum to get kids familiar with and get our youth familiar with talking about it, because it is hard.
Yeah, and and also if all kids have the hotline and the text to talk links, they can report anonymously through that too and get support. So keeping them, and in Colorado we have what's called Safe to Tell. So they can have access to that without having to tell someone that they know. So we are going to break you out into breakout rooms. Phoebe or CJ are going to drop a link in, so please open that, because we want to generate a source for all of us to access of ways that you think of to be able to provide ongoing support and follow-up for the school community, for families, for anyone impacted. So any ideas you have, please add them to this list. Avoid memorials and anniversary type things, right? Zach and I talked yesterday about everybody wants to do a bench or a brick or some solid memorial, a statue, or on their anniversary of a death or a birthday. We have to be careful with those things because it can re-traumatize. It can also affect and impact the family and community members. So that's where your point person within your school community who's reaching out to that family can work with them around what's appropriate to honor that family member. But we're talking about little things that you can do, ways you can support. So we're going to put you into a breakout room for 5 minutes. Go ahead and add to the list, talk as much as you want, and we'll see you back here. While you guys were gone, we were talking about the memorials and the anniversary type, how everybody wants to kind of do that right out of the gate, but it's not the school's place to take that on. And also, if a family does request something, you can collaborate with them. We don't want to say no, but you can collaborate with them, and also giving them time to grieve and not worry about what has to be done, giving them another thing to worry about or think about. Anybody else have any ideas they want to share out? Quiet group.
Oh,
Go ahead, Emery.
No, is this Carolina? Okay, no, Carolina were in the breakout room, and again, we were having a discussion as it relates to the combination of course, you want to honor, the individual, but at the same time, perhaps, format of a celebration of life, although we recognize it's a little tricky, particularly if it's a younger person in that, but, we were giving thoughts, maybe students getting together and doing an activity that person enjoyed doing, and in recognizing them in that sense.
I love that idea.
Yeah, those are great.
That's a great idea. Yeah, and people really do appreciate that type of togetherness.
Yeah, we noticed a bunch of, they would do like prayer vigils or something like that in the school. Would say you can use the football field, or you totally can, and that's that collaboration. But doing something like things like that can be very impactful too.
Yep.
Awesome.
Okay, so is this me or you, Zach?
That's you.
Okay. So first we need to increase our protective factors. So we're going back to the beginning, right? We're
Yes,
leaving
back
with
to the beginning.
protective factors starting at the beginning. Okay. So we need to know, remember those individual protective factors, the beliefs in that reason for living, that sense of belonging, what their cultural identity is, having connections with that, making sure they have effective coping skills, social emotional learning, that programs can do that. That's one of our expertise if you need help with that. And then those relationship protective factors, that social support, like Zach said earlier, maybe they don't have a great family, but they have a chosen family. Relationships with teachers, and maybe some of you have attended before, have heard this from us, but oftentimes so many kids in our schools go through the day without ever hearing their name. There's studies on this, and the number of students that never hear their name, and the most important thing to a person is their name. So even walking down the hall, you see someone, call them by name, say hi. That might be the only time their name gets said in the day. Something as simple as that. Community protective factors. Is there access to affordable, high quality healthcare? If there isn't, what are those free resources, ways that they can get connected? The connection to school, communities, social institutions, those memorandums of understanding, those engaging agreements that are proactive, and then the societal protective factors. The objections to suicide, we have that mindset of it's bad. It's going to happen. It's part of our world. Let's recognize it. Let's do something about it. Let's not wait, but do. And then figure out a way to reduce access to the lethal means. We gave you some strategies. You can also partner with your sorry, I can't even think, your police, sheriff's department outside of that to help figuring out how to reduce those lethal means too. They're more than willing to come in and partner with you on that and teach you about things you may not even know exist. So guess what? We do have ways to support you in this work. Zach and I and others from our team are available to work with you, help you design your response, your crisis team, your processes, your protocols, or if something happens, we're here to help. So we do have SAMHSA prevention grants for suicide and mental health that we can help you develop. Many states have grants around prevention and mental health, which we can help you with writing. Use us as your resource. We're here for you. This isn't just a one and done thing. Feel free to reach out to us. We have a team ready to help you. And if you have an idea, we'll find a way. And then we're going to drop the feedback survey into the chat now. Please open that up, take the time to fill that out, or you can use it with your camera on your phone and pull it up with a QR code. When you complete that survey, you'll be guaranteed to get our recording, the presentation, as well as your certificate of attendance, so that you can use that for your license renewals for your continuing education credits. And lastly, Zach and I's contact information is here. Again, like we keep saying, we're here for you. Reach out with any questions that you have. We love it when we have participants reach out after, and we immediately provide resources or connect with you.